And I understand that it's a sensitive topic because a lot of people in the conscious community, the yoga space, practice Kemetic yoga. And there's a lot of benefits that people get from practicing Kemetic yoga. People have been practicing for years, and there's no denial of its effectiveness and the benefits that people receive from it. So when I first did a post about it, it was perceived to be an attack on Kemetic yoga, and that's not my intention at all. I made that clear the first time, the second time, and I'm making it clear tonight that I am not in no way attacking the practice of Kemetic yoga. In fact, I encourage our people to engage in Kemetic yoga and find a competent instructor, and sign up and actually put it to practice, because it's very beneficial. And I myself will be looking to do that in the very near future as well. So I want to get that out the way. Now, what I did cover were the issue of the Kemetic yoga postures. Now, there's more to Kemetic yoga than just the postures, and I understand that. And that was not my focus, and that's not my focus for tonight. So I'm just going to lead the discussion in this, and I'm going to go straight forward through it. And Brother Unk and Sister Naya, if you have any comments while I'm going through this, by all means, you can interrupt me, because I have a tendency to be a little long-winded here. So I'll try not to do that. Try not to do that tonight. But let me get through the slides, and hopefully people can benefit from what I'm sharing. All right. So the topic is aspective versus perspective and Kemetic yoga postures. All right. So the first thing that I always like to do is to state the claim. All right. So this is the claim that I've made on Facebook, and I've been consistent with this claim for years. Today's Kemetic yoga postures are not actual historical postures at all. They are a result of the scribal convention of aspective art, in which they expressed multiple angles simultaneously. The general rule was the torso, the shoulders, the single eye, the waist garments, and any headdress or crown was to be carved in frontal view, while all else is in profile view. Now, this applies to the figures. All right. Objects were the same way, but there were a different set of rules applied to different objects. But this is to human figures or figures. All right. So that's the claim. All right. Now, what I would recommend, I'm going to start off with references. These are two excellent books that I encourage everyone to get, that covers what I have discussed and been consistently discussing, which is the principle of aspective versus perspective perceptual attitudes. All right, so the book on the left is Principles of Egyptian Art. The book on the right is Reading Egyptian Art. They're both available on Amazon. I have no business ties with it. I'm just giving a reference for you all to make sure you look up. All right. So to start it off, aspective and perspective, what are they? They are expressions of perceptual attitudes. Okay. So I'm going to start off with two working definitions of both of these words, so we can synchronize what I mean. All right. Perspective. This is something that a lot of us are already used to, and we use this word a lot in general. All right. Perspective describes a viewing as it appears to the viewer, who is an arbitrary individual at a random point in time and in a particular spot chosen by him and in whatever lighting there happens to be. So this is something that we're used to every day, all day. Okay, this is not something special or something new. Whether you knew what it was called or not is maybe a different story. So here's an example of perspective art. So basically what perspective is saying is that whatever your angle is, whatever your view, if you're to reproduce what you see, you're going to reproduce it based on your perspective, your angle, and where you are at a point in space and time. So this is an example of this lady is drawing the model, and she's drawing from her perspective. Now, if there were other artists in a circle around this particular model, they would draw the same model from their perspective. And so their pictures would look different. But from her perspective, this is what it would look like, and this is what it's called, perspective. All right? So now we're going to move to aspective. So aspective is something that may be new to a lot of us and that we're not used to. So in normal usage, aspective describes a restricted viewing, a gaze directed at one individual part. When the individual part is separated from its context, it loses its relational values. That is, it simultaneously loses both its relationship with the surroundings and modifications this relationship may produce. In other words, one may say that the individual part regains its own proper form in an aspective view, and all the distortions, displacements, and foreshortenings which it would have undergone through its subordination to the whole disappear. So basically what that's saying, that said a lot, but basically it's saying that an aspective view is to look at individual components of what you're looking at, and you're taking the most important angles and points of that part, and you're drawing it as is, irregardless of its relationship to everything else. Okay, and I'm going to show an example that's going to illustrate that if that was confusing. All right. So last paragraph. Aspective view means you are showing the most identifiable parts of the subject. The depiction of each part provides the maximum information from different angles. All right. So here's the question that we have to ask when it comes to ancient Kemet and the scribes and what we see as art. So the question is, what was the scribes or artist's perceptual attitude to the object being depicted? And the answer is the scribe renders what he is depicting part for part as it ideally is, always, everywhere, and for everybody. And as an example, a square surface is shown as an equal right-angle quadrilateral. Greek or Western perspective art renders the same original as it appears to the viewer. Depending on where the viewer places himself, the sides are foreshortened, the angles are distorted, and the lines become finer as distance increases. So that's the difference. So aspective, you're going to draw it as is, irregardless of where you are. And perspective, you're going to draw it based on where you are, and therefore the angles may be different. You have depth, you'll have the foreground, background, etc., etc. All right. So I'm going to illustrate this with some pictures. And the remainder of my slides are going to be pictures, and I'm going to give some commentary about each picture. And I'm going to try to get through this brief, but not too fast to where you don't understand. So here is an actual ancient Kemetic or Kemetic artifact. This is a perfect example of aspective method. So what you're looking at is you have human figures surrounding a pool of water, a lake. We see a boat on the lake, or, drawn on a lake. We have trees on the outer court, on the outer part. We have a building, an enclosure, a dwelling place over here on the left. We have trees within another section of a courtyard and little shrubbery around the lake. Now, we know in reality that human beings do not stand on water like this. We know that boats do not sail on water like this. We know that trees do not grow from left to right. We know buildings are not erected, from left to right. So what we're looking at is that we're looking at multiple angles all at once. And that's what aspective method is all about. Multiple angles being simultaneously represented. All right. Here's another one. We have fish in the pond. Now we know fish don't swim with their side fins facing up. We know that they swim with their top fin would be towards the top of the water, but they're not drawn that way because they're drawn with a distorted angle to show the most information that we could possibly have to be able to identify the object that's being represented. That's what aspective art is about, and that's what we're looking at again. So we see trees growing left and right. We know they don't grow that way. Trees up here. We have a sister sitting here doing something, etc. All right. So just give an example. Now, go to the next. Now here should be something that's very, very easy to understand. So here are two figures. On the left, we have Ka-Gimni of, I believe, the 5th dynasty. And we have another figure, Khnum-Hotep of the 12th dynasty. And in both instances, Khnum-Hotep and Ka-Gimni, they're standing in the same posture. Oh, they're depicted in the same posture, I should say. Now, what we need to know here is that both of these are a representation of aspective methods. Now, how do we know that? So when we look at Ka Gimni, we're looking at he's standing in profile view. He's facing to the left. But if you notice what would be his right shoulder, and then we have over here his left shoulder, we have his right arm attached to his left shoulder. That's backwards. We have his left arm attached to what will be his right shoulder, and that's backwards. This arm right here is his left arm, and it's holding the staff. This arm here is his right arm, and it's holding the scepter, and the scepter is behind him, going behind him in the scene. And then we have his garment, where the front of it is facing us at a 90-degree angle towards us, and it's in full frontal view. So remember the rules. The shoulders and torso, full frontal view. The single eye, full frontal view. The garments, the waist around the garments, full frontal view. Everything else is in profile. Same thing with Khnum Hotep. So I don't have to repeat it, but if you look at Khnum Hotep, the same thing. His right arm is on his left shoulder. His left arm is on his right shoulder. Now, what's interesting is I'm going to zoom in to Khnum Hotep. So here's a better close-up shot of Khnum Hotep. Now let's analyze this a bit more. What we're actually looking at is Khnum Hotep's chest and his back at the same time. So over here on the left, we see his chest, his pectoral area, and over here we don't. This part is his back, because this is why we see his right shoulder, his right hand or right arm. If he was facing us, it would be his left shoulder, but it's not. It's his right shoulder, because this part of his body is his back. This is from the angle of his back. And this side is from the angle of his chest. With the arm will be from his back. So we're looking at the chest area and his back. All right. And notice that you can see the right hand, and that will be on his left shoulder. We know that that's humanly impossible. Okay, so I just want to make that clear so you can see close up that this is his left arm, left hand holding the staff. Right arm, okay, right hand. Yes.
Wujawu, is this the perspective or the aspective?
This is all aspective.
Okay.
Okay, so the easy thing to remember about the two is that perspective is a single angle from whatever you're viewing. Okay. And an aspective is multiple angles at one time.
Okay.
So right here, this is multiple angles. We're looking at his back. The arms are reversed, and this is a reason why we see in a lot of Kemetic scenes people with two left hands, and people always ask, well, why do they have two left hands or two left feet or et cetera, because they're operating from multiple angles at one time. Okay, so let's continue. Here is Khnum Hotep again. This is the aspective representation of him drawn on a flat surface, as I showed before. On the right-hand side would be Khnum Hotep, how he would stand naturally. So this is how this individual would actually be standing. Not how you see it on the left, but how you see it on the right. This is perspective view, and over on the left is aspective view. Okay, so notice that his right hand, that we don't see in the statue, but we know that his right shoulder is over there holding the scepter, and then his left hand, left shoulder, and left arm is holding the staff. That's how this individual will be standing, not like how you see on the left. So the left is not a realistic or naturalistic representation. It is an aspective representation. All right. So here's another example. We have aspective on the left and perspective on the right. So here are cows drawn on a flat surface or carved on a flat surface. Notice that the horns would appear to come out the center of their head, and we know cows do not have horns like that. They're not unicorns. But the horns are drawn in full frontal view, a different angle than what the head is. And this was not confusing to the ancient Remich or the ancient Egyptians. Everyone understood this. So this is why we bringing this information forward so we can understand it. Now, how the cow would naturally be postural position would be how you see it on the right. And you see the horns are correctly facing forward. Why? Because the cow's head is facing forward. Everything is facing forward. Okay, so that's the difference. And I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly because I'm going to just demonstrate the same thing over and over again. So here we see the human eye. We see a human in profile view. Now, a normal human being in profile view, we would not see the entire eye like this. But the entire eye is shown because it's showing the most important and most information dealing with an object so that we can identify it. That was the part of the rule. So this is where we see a full human eye. We wouldn't see that if this was drawn or carved in a naturalistic representation. All right, so that's what I'm putting out there. This is how a profile view of a human being would look like. This is full profile. You will see part of the eye, but not the whole eye. The eye is not on the side of our heads. All right. So no one would try to mimic this, knowing that this is an artistic canon or artistic style in ancient times versus this. All right. So now let's look at the difference between poses that famous poses that we're familiar with. The pose on the left is what's called the pose of adoration. And a lot of people are familiar with it, and they perform this particular pose in adoration. We call it dua. So on the left-hand side, we have aspective, where the figure is drawn with the shoulders in full frontal view, and everything else is in profile. But would this person be standing like this actually? And the answer is no. So how would the person be standing? They would be standing as you see this figure on the right. This is how this position is actually done. With both hands, everything is facing forward. The shoulders are not turned to a 90-degree angle to the right as you see on the left. Everything is facing forward. This would be a pose of adoration. All right? That's the difference. Next. On the right-hand side, we see an aspective view of the deity Sekhmet. Okay, the shoulders are squared. They are full frontal view. We have one breast exposed. The other breast is not. Everything else is in profile view. Except the head crown. Remember, one of the rules I said, if the headdress or they have a crown, the crown is also in full frontal view. Now, perspectively, a naturalistic rendition of this same figure is what we see on the left-hand side. These are actual statues. Everything is facing to the front. Everything is facing in one direction in all three of these examples. All right. Next. Here on the right-hand side, we have a picture of a ram-headed deity. And notice that the horns are frontal view. They're squared towards us. The sun discs, the cobras on the top. This would not be a naturalistic rendition because the horns would go across the head, not from front to back. These rams would not be unicorns. Okay? On the left, same thing. See the crown? A king or a person would not wear their crown tilted at a 90-degree angle. But it's represented this way because this is aspective view, because the scribes made it their intention for us to see most of the object to be able to identify it. Next. Here is an image of Amen. Okay. In an aspective view, his shoulders are full frontal, squared off towards us. His crown is squared off towards us in frontal view. But look how it is naturally. You see the statue? Everything is facing forward. The crown at the top, the plume of feathers, these are plume of feathers. These are all facing forward. Over here, they're not. Because this is an artistic style versus a naturalistic style. Artistic, naturalistic. Okay? So no one would expect anybody to sit this way. No one would expect anybody to wear their crown this way. And by the way, this is King Hatshepsut kneeling down, being coronated king of Kemet, and being sanctioned by the deity Amen. So even with her kneeling, her shoulders are squared and frontal. No one would be kneeling that way. They would be kneeling, everything would be facing forward. This is only an artistic representation a canon that was created by the scribes. Okay, so now with that said, what I want to go into is an actual Kemetic yoga pose, because the poses that I've shown so far is just to drive the point home that this is a real and ingenious style that the scribes created and lasted for 3,500 years, over 3,500 years. As long as Kemet existed, this style existed. You can find it from Dynasty 1 all the way to the end of Kemet as we know it. All right. So there was just various different poses to drive that point home, and hopefully people understand the difference between those two artistic expressions. So now we're going to go and show an actual Kemetic yoga pose and address the question that was asked earlier. So here is a representation inside of a tomb on the left. On the right hand side, we see the good brother Yasir Hotep Ra Lawrence, I believe. Brother, I just refer to him as Brother Yasir, and he is pretty much the foremost and very popular person in the yogic circles, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this brother. And he does great work with Kemetic yoga, and he has a lot of people that have been certified and students of Kemetic yoga. All right. He is actually mimicking this particular pose that you see on the walls. So the question is this an actual pose that the ancient Remich or ancient Egyptians did? And the answer is no. The reason why is because of the things that I've already explained, that this is simply an artistic style, an artistic representation, and there were rules to this. We have to remember, just like there's rules to language, we have grammar, which is made up of morphology and syntax, and we have punctuation in writing scripts and things like that. Well, art has grammar, if you will. Art has rules, and they developed these rules and canonized it so that all the scribes through thousands of years did the same thing the same way. Okay? Now, this particular pose, some people refer to it as the Ampu pose, but it is the Henu posture, the posture of Henu. And I did a different video. I'm not going to go over it tonight, but where I gave the translation for all of the glyphs and the columns. That's why you see the numbers here. In column 2, we see the word Heni, and we see the determinative here of the same pose. You see this little figure here is the actual determinative in the same posture. This is the pose of Heni, the gesture of Heni. Over here we see the word again in column 8 at the bottom and at the top of column 9. This time it's Henu. And the word actually means to rejoice, to jubilate. And in the other form, it means jubilation. And this is what these three figures are doing. The middle person is the king. The king's name is above his head. And this is Ramesu. All right. Menpeti Ra would be his throne name. And on the right-hand side, Anpu-headed figure, or the jackal-headed figure, represents the souls of the city of Pi, which is in Lower Kemet. And you see the city here. The falcon-headed deity represents the souls or the people of a different city in Upper Kemet called Nekhen. And you see the name here in column 7 and the top of 8. Nekhen and Pi. These are two ancestral cities that were very important to the ancient Remich, ancient Egyptians. Okay? And they're performing this particular pose. All right? So now, in Kemetic yoga, the postures that we're seeing, this particular one specifically, is an imitation of a scribal style, not an actual pose that these ancient Egyptians actually performed. And that was the claim. Okay? And so the question is, how would these three figures actually be posed? Or what is the actual Henu posture or gesture? And here's the answer. We see Enpu. This is a statue that is located at Cairo Museum. And you can see in the far right, left the falcon-headed one. Both of them are posed forward-facing. Everything is facing forward. Nothing is sideways at a 90-degree angle or cocked-backed whatsoever. There was a difference in the statuary that the scribes and the artisans did versus what they carved on flat surfaces. On flat surfaces, they used Aspective method, And on statuary, they use perspective, naturalistic methods or expressions. This is how the pose should be done that you see on the left, not how you see it on the right. Okay? So we showed Enpu. Now let's show the king. This is how the king would be posed. Notice how everything is faced forward. Okay? Not 90-degree angle as you see on the right-hand side. Now we're going to move to the falcon. The falcon-headed one. This is how this particular gesture should be done. Not like you see it on the right, but how you see it on the left. All right? Now, if you've noticed, if you caught on to what I'm showing, then you'll realize that if you want to know how different postures were performed, you look at the statues, not on the flat surfaces carved. Don't expect it to be a naturalistic representation on flat surfaces carved as opposed to the statuary, the various different statues. That's where you'll find how to perform these particular gestures. All right? And I mentioned this before on my original post, is that if in doubt, then those who claim that these postures on the flat surface are true representations of actual postures, then you have to find any statue where this same pose is done at the same angles, and you will not find it. The reason why is because these are not poses at all. These are not postures at all, done this particular way. They're showing multiple angles at the same time. Remember that. And here they are again. Here's Enpu and the falcon Henu postures. So both of them represent the personifications of the souls of Pi and Nekin. And this is how Henu rejoice or jubilation is done. And this is in the Cairo Museum in Egypt. All right. Just a few more examples. And then I'll open up for comments if Unc and Naya, if you have comments, or not sure if I can't see the comments in the chat. So here's a king's enthroned king in the figure of Wasir, and we see that he's representative of Wasir Kenti Amintiu. All right, as we can see in the column right before his face here. And so notice how this figure is sitting. With everything, the torso area is at a 90-degree angle from where everything else is facing, profile view. The arms and everything. Notice the ribbon, the sash. It's also facing us in frontal view. But would it be that way naturally? The answer is no. This is a scribal method that we know today as aspective. This is not how the king sat. No one sat like this. All right? No one would hold a crook and flail at a 90-degree angle and everything else is facing forward and rule their kingdom in this manner. This is not done this way. How would it be done? Like you see it on the left. This is a statue, a smaller statue, but this is how everything would be facing forward. All right, so I'm just showing the contrast between the two different styles. Here's another one. On the left-hand side, we see aspective, an aspective representation of someone offering bowls, the bowl offering. We call them new bowls. All right, notice that the shoulders are full frontal view, squared off towards us. We're viewing this particular object. But naturally, in statues, everything faces forward, as you see in these two examples here. All right, here's a king and a king presenting the bowl offering as well. Kneeling down, everything is facing forward. Nothing is contorted. Nothing is at a 90-degree angle whatsoever. This is how this would be done naturally, not like how you see it on the left-hand side. Artistic versus naturalistic. And here's the example side by side. Artistic versus naturalistic. Everything is facing forward. Over here we have aspective rules applying. Shoulders are squared off, etc. Here's some more poses. Now, mind you, not all of these poses are Kemetic yoga poses, so I don't want to get misconstrued. The point here that I'm showing these other poses is to show a consistent style that the scribes did aspectively versus perspectively, with the statuary versus what was carved on flat surfaces. So notice that all of the statues are naturalistic. They're all facing, the body parts are facing all the same direction. This is an offering of ma'at. This is a individual giving an offering of ma'at. This person is giving a gesture of dua, but in a kneeling position instead of standing. This is the position of adoration, a kneeling version. Everything is face forward. The shoulders are not squared off towards us. They're not bent 90 degrees from being in profile view. This is the offering of peace offering or a food offering. You see a Hotep symbol here. That was a mat represented food. And so this person giving an offering, everything is face forward. This person also as well, dua or adoration. This pose and this pose, same pose. So you see that everything is facing the same direction. Nothing is angled. One angle, not multiple angles at once, which will be aspective. Here is a aspective representation of a woman giving birth. Remember, in ancient times, women gave birth squatting. They used to put their feet on what's called birthing stones, and squat and utilize the force of gravity to help with the delivery of a child. And so this is aspectively represented here, where the woman's shoulders are squared off at a 90-degree angle from profile view. And we know women did not give birth this way, at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so this is not naturalistic. This is an artistic form, an ancient, ingenious way of representing these things. Here's just a few more. I'm going to quickly go through these. Here's some more aspective. Shoulders are squared off. Everything else is a 90-degree angle. Here's a deceased person. Shoulders are squared off, facing us. Everything else is profile view. All right. No one sat like this naturally. All right. Here's some more examples. Shoulders are squared off. Everything else is in profile view. We see the full eye. We would normally see it that way. The king with Heru. This is actually Horemheb. Here we can see his name in the glyphs up above. Shoulders are squared off. Shoulders are squared off for the deity Heru. No one stood like this in real life. This is an artistic method that's being applied that we know today as aspective. Of course, they didn't call it that back then, but we know it today as aspective. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Here's another example. On the right-hand side, we have aspective representation, where we have people marching, running, or what have you, walking, running, marching. Notice that all of their shoulders are squared towards us. Their torso is at a 90-degree angle from their profile view, from the direction they're walking or marching. No one walked that way. No one marched that way. That would not be realistic, or it would defy